Pennhurst State School and Hospital, originally known as the Eastern Pennsylvania State Institution for the Feeble-Minded and Epileptic, was an institution for mentally and physically disabled individuals of Southeastern Pennsylvania located in East Vincent, Pennsylvania. After a century of controversy, it closed on December 9, 1987. History. Overview. In 1903, the Pennsylvania legislature authorized the creation of the Eastern State Institution for the Feeble-Minded and Epileptic, and a commission was organized to take into consideration the number and status of the feeble-minded and epileptic persons in the state and determine a placement for construction to care for these residents. This commission discovered 1,146 feeble-minded persons in insane hospitals and 2,627 in almshouses, county care hospitals, reformatories, and prisons, who were in immediate need of specialized institutional care. The legislation stated that the buildings would be in two groups, one for the educational and industrial department, and one for the custodial or asylum department. The institution was required to accommodate no fewer than 500 inmates or patients, with room for additions. Construction and design. Building designation. From 1903 to 1908 the first buildings were constructed on 633.913 acres of Crab Hill in Spring City, Pennsylvania, Chester County, on what was referred to as the Lower Campus. Out of the first few buildings constructed, F was the girls' dining room, G was the kitchen and storeroom, H, I and K were a cottage for girls, N was the boys' dining room, P was the teacher's home, Q, T, U and V were a cottage for boys, R was a school, W was laundry and sewing, and X was the powerhouse. P was used as a temporary administration building until the institution's opening in 1918, along with the opening of L&M in 1919. In 1921, Whitman and Wilson I and II were constructed along with Penn Hall for employee housing. In 1929, the Assembly Building was complete and functioned as the gymnasium and auditorium. The buildings on Lower Campus are currently labeled with letters such as F, I, K, P, Q, R, N, U, V, T, W and X, with names later assigned in the 1960s. In 1930, the first buildings on the Upper Campus, otherwise known as the Female Colony, were completed and named Pershing, Buchanan, Audubon and Keystone. Capitol Hall was erected after World War II along with Devon constructed on Lower Campus. Horizon Hall opened later in 1971. Lower Campus buildings, administration, Philadelphia, Quaker, Rockwell, Franklin, Nobel, Union, Vincennes, Tinicum, Industry, Penn, Devon, Mayflower, Limerick, Assembly, Storeroom, Laundry, Whitman, Wilson I, Wilson II, Hershey. Upper Campus buildings, Pershing, Buchanan, Audubon, Keystone, Capitol, Horizon. Other buildings, Powerhouse, Treatment Plant, Director's House, Greenhouse. Appearance. The older buildings, designed by Philip H. Johnson, were two-storied, and made of red brick, terracotta and granite trimmings. They were connected by fireproof tunnels with walkways on top of the tunnels for the use of transporting residents, with a parallel steam piping system, and were distributed on the 1,400-acre campus in the cottage plan formation. The buildings were designed to provide a large number of small rooms occupied by from 2 to 3 beds, a few small dormitories with from 8 to 10 beds, and a large exercising day room. George Lovett was the architect for several of the buildings constructed post-1937. The Central Administration Building has 2 side porticoes, a front portico and a copper cupola in the center of the roof. The Hospital Building, Whitman and Wilson I and II are not tunnel-connected, nor is Penn Hall and the Powerhouse. The remaining cottage buildings are L and I-shaped with the exception of Dietary, which E-shaped is, and Devon Hall, which is H-shaped. Railroad. The Pennsylvania Railroad created a Pennhurst station on its Schuylkill division to accommodate Pennhurst. Coal and other supplies were delivered by rail for decades to operate the Powerhouse. Tracks are still visible under the pavement behind Dietary and Devon Hall, which allowed boxcars to be brought directly onto the main campus. The railroad tracks have been removed and are now part of the Schuylkill River Trail, the superintendent reported to the Board of Trustees that it is without question absolutely wrong to place the feeble-minded and epileptic in the same institution. They are not the same. They are as different, one from the other, as day is from night. They are mentally, physically and morally incompatible, and require entirely different treatment. The mission of the institution was clarified once again and only people with mental disabilities were to be admitted. Recreation of the train tracks has started and they are working to create a working train transportation system. General operation. Opening. On November 23, 1908, patient number 1 was admitted to the hospital. Within 4 years of operation, Pennhurst was already overcrowded and under pressure to admit immigrants, orphans and criminals. Classification. Residents were classified into mental categories of imbecile or insane, into physical categories of epileptic or healthy, and into dental categories of good, poor or treated teeth when admitted. Physical condition of children. Some of the sensorial and functional anomalies, vices of constitution and habit, and disorders of volition common to the feeble-minded admitted to Pennhurst were strabismus, defective sight and or hearing, mute, semi-mute, imperfect speech, paralytic, epileptic, blind, imperfect gait, imperfect prehension, deformity of face, head, limbs and or feet, microcephalic or hydrocephalic head, and offensive habits. Industries. The branches of industry which residents were assigned to were mattress making, shoemaking and repair, grading, farming, laundry, domestic duties, sewing, baking, butchering, painting, and working in the store. Segregation and eugenics. In 1913, the legislature appointed a commission for the care of the feeble-minded which stated that the disabled were unfit for citizenship and posed a menace to the peace, and thus recommended a program of custodial care. Furthermore, the commission desired to prevent the intermixing of the genes of those imprisoned with the general population. In the biennial report to the legislature submitted by the Board of Trustees, Pennhurst's chief physician quoted Henry H. Goddard, a leading eugenicist, as follows. Every feeble-minded person is a potential criminal. The general public, although more convinced today than ever before that it is a good thing to segregate the idiot or the distinct imbecile, they have not as yet been convinced as to the proper treatment of the defective delinquent, which is the brighter and more dangerous individual. Females. In 1916, the Board of Trustees initiated a plan to increase the capacity of the institution by constructing cottages specifically for females to segregate them from the males, in part to prevent pregnancies. Criticism. In 1968, conditions at Pennhurst were exposed in a 5-part television news report anchored by local CBS 10 correspondent Bill Baldini. Suffer the little children. In 1983, 9 employees were indicted on charges ranging from slapping and beating patients to arranging for patients to assault each other. The Haldeman case, which resulted in the closure of the institution, also detailed widespread patient abuse. Closure. A class action case was filed against Pennhurst State School on behalf of its patients. The case was heard by U.S. District Judge Raymond J. Broderick, who in 1977 ruled that the conditions at the institution violated patients' constitutional rights. Pennhurst State School was ultimately closed in 1987. Its 460 patients were discharged or transferred to other facilities in a process known as deinstitutionalization that lasted several years, and included discussion of treatment plans with each patient's family. The lawsuit was filed May 30, 1974 by Philadelphia attorney David Furlegger representing the plaintiff class. The suit was then joined by the United States and by the Pennsylvania Association for Retarded Citizens. Haldeman v. Pennhurst State School and Hospital. The allegations of abuse led to the first lawsuit of its kind in the United States, a federal class action, Haldeman v. Pennhurst State School and Hospital, 446 F. Sup. 1295, which asserted that the developmentally disabled in the care of the state have a constitutional right to appropriate care and education. Terry Lee Haldeman had been a resident of Pennhurst, and upon release she filed suit in the federal district court. The suit had started after Terry had visited her parents at home and was found to have unexplained bruises. Although the case was not expected to reach the level it did, the courts later found that conditions at Pennhurst were unsanitary, inhumane and dangerous, violating the 14th Amendment, and that Pennhurst used cruel and unusual punishment in violation of the 8th and 14th Amendments, as well as the Pennsylvania Mental Health and Retardation Act of 1966. The district court ruled that certain of the patient's rights had been violated. The district court decision was the first time that any federal court ruled that an institution must be closed based on a constitutional right to community services. Ultimately, however, the U.S. Supreme Court vacated the judgment based on the 11th Amendment principle that federal courts cannot order state officials to comply with state laws. As noted below, the institution was eventually closed pursuant to a settlement agreement that required that community-based services be offered to all of its residents. The Supreme Court of the United States case, Pennhurst State School and Hospital v. Haldeman, 451 U.S. 1 became an important rule of law, known as the Pennhurst Doctrine, which has been cited by state attorneys general as binding precedent under United States constitutional law. Modern day. The Department of Military Affairs acquired the upper campus of Pennhurst and began work to reuse it as a veterans' home. In 1986, the upper campus cottage units reopened as the Southeastern Veterans Center. In 1990, renovations began on Horizon Hall, one of the newest buildings at Pennhurst, as part of a project to establish a nursing facility at the Veterans Center. It reopened in 1993 as Coates Hall. After many years of determining what to do with Pennhurst, Congressman Jim Golick sought to establish a federal veterans cemetery at Pennhurst in 2003, but the VA rejected the proposal. In 2001, the state adopted the Keystone Principles concerning the state's duties to maintain historic property and to consult with the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission before transferring the property into private hands. Local county official supervisors approved a private development and Pennhurst was sold to a developer, Pennhurst Associates, for $2 million. The Pennhurst Memorial and Preservation Alliance was formed to advocate for certain uses of the site. Pennhurst was added to the National Register of Historic Places in Pennsylvania's list of the most at-risk Pennsylvania properties, as well as the International Coalition of Sites of Conscience, a worldwide network of historic sites specifically dedicated to remembering struggles for justice. In partnership with the Preservation Alliance of Greater Philadelphia, PMPA obtained a grant to complete a reuse design and feasibility study of the Pennhurst campus. As of 2010, the administration building has been partially renovated and reopened as the Pennhurst Asylum Haunted House. The attraction has been successful, though controversial among locals and those previously affiliated with Pennhurst. Penn Organic Recycling LLC currently operates on 4.5 acre of Pennhurst, offering topping, composting and food waste services. The Department of Environmental Protection permitted the composting operation at Pennhurst to maintain no more than 25 tons. Pennhurst has been featured on the shows Ghost Adventures on Travel Channel, Ghost Hunters on Sci-Fi, Ghost Asylum on Destination America, Celebrity Ghost Stories on Bio, Snooki and JWOWW on MTV, The Haunting of Beverly Mitchell on Bio, Haunted History on History Channel, Ghosts of Mayflower, A Pennhurst Haunting, and the self-titled movie Pennhurst, featuring Beverly Mitchell and Haley Duff. See also, Mental health. References. External links, Antiquity Echoes History, present-day photos, and video of Pennhurst State School and Hospital, Jard Strugler Pennhurst Pictures by Jard Strugler, Wayne Benner Ultimate Pennhurst Photo Collection by Wayne Benner, for Tadita History and Photographs, soul-imagery.com Pennhurst Gallery.